Right now on Morning News Now, take two in a historic election. Former President Donald Trump is now once again President-elect Donald Trump, the 45th president, riding a red wave back to the White House and promising to unite the country.
This was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. There's never been anything like this in this country and maybe beyond. This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to have.
Vice President Kamala Harris officially conceded the race Wednesday, congratulating the former president, but also vowing to continue the fight for reproductive rights and other issues that drove her White House run.
While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign. Sometimes the fight takes a while. The important thing is don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. Don't ever stop trying to make the world a better place.
As President Biden prepares to address the nation today, we're digging into the impact in Washington from the White House to the Capitol and beyond.
Good morning. Good to have you with us on a Thursday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Great to be with you after a historic election in America. We have a lot to get to this morning. In the wake of the vice president's concession speech, we're beginning to get a picture of what a second Trump administration could look like as reaction from the world streams in.
We have a team of correspondents covering every aspect of this historic election. We begin with NBC's Garrett Hake in West Palm Beach, Florida, where the 45th president is now preparing to become the 47th.
Hey, Savannah, Joe, good morning. A big day for Donald Trump yesterday, a long day in his first day as president-elect, declaring victory overnight yesterday. Yes, it was still yesterday. And then beginning the work of his presidential transition. He met with staff and allies yesterday, taking foreign leader calls throughout the day, including Volodymyr Zelensky from Ukraine, President Xi of China, also taking calls from Vice President Harris and from President Biden, who invited Trump back to the White House. That's all about ensuring that smooth transition of power. Now, we heard from Trump's two sons yesterday in interviews, although not Trump himself, kind of reveling in the victory and marveling at the inroads he was able to make politically all around the country with what looks like a new Republican coalition, or at least a new Trump coalition. He did better with working class Americans. He did better with young people. He did better with men. And he did especially better with Latinos. Now, we're going to see exactly how that plays out in some of these other races around the country that remain uncalled. There are some House races in places that we refer to as deep blue states, where Donald Trump's performance may be enough to carry other politicians to victory. And the other fallout from yesterday's shockwave politically is the end of Donald Trump's criminal prosecutions. We have reporting from the DOJ that they are evaluating how best to wind down the remaining cases against Donald Trump, according to two people familiar with the matter, in keeping with the department's longstanding practice of not prosecuting a sitting president. So a lot to happen between now and January 20th, but that work of the transition really all across the federal government, not just here in Palm Beach, now underway in earnest. Joe, Savannah?
The day after yesterday. Garrett, thank you so much.
For her part, Vice President Kamala Harris addressed her supporters yesterday following her loss.
In the concession speech at her alma mater, Howard University in Washington, D.C., Harris tried to console Democrats. She reaffirmed her commitment to the Constitution and to a peaceful transfer of power and urged her supporters not to give up.
Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power. While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign. This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves.
NBC News correspondent Monica Alba joins us from Washington, D.C. Monica, good morning. So Harris packed a lot into a relatively short concession speech. It was about 11 minutes. Tell us more about how she chose to frame this defeat, reassure her supporters. What was the mood like for those who were watching?
Well, it was really significant, Savannah and Joe, that she delivered this speech at the site that she thought if she had won the election, she would be delivering her victory speech at Howard University, which is a sentimental, meaningful place for her as her alma mater that was meant to be a homecoming and then ended up being this place where she formally conceded the race. And she did talk about this in the context of not throwing up your hands, as you saw there, not despairing, but instead she urged her supporters and Americans to mobilize mobilize, to organize, and to try to think about how this next phase will really be about the Democratic messaging in contrast to what a Trump second presidency will look like. And she did want to thank her millions of supporters, but was very clear about this message we're going to hear from President Biden as well, that this should be a peaceful transfer of power, that they should accept the election results, and that it is time to move on. But her supporters who were assembled there, some of whom had been there the night before and were sent home, were very emotional, and it was clearly a very poignant moment and message from the vice president.
So, Monica, the current president, Joe Biden, also released a statement yesterday. We will hear from him a little later today. But so far, what are we hearing?
So he did say, and it's something he has said for months, that the best decision he ever made as president was selecting her as his running mate, as his partner in all of this. And he has said it was the first decision he made when he was seeking the nomination and got it in 2020. And, quote, "It was the best decision I made. Her story represents the best of America's story. And as she made clear today, I have no doubt that she'll continue writing that story." So we know that the president and the vice president did speak by phone yesterday, and the president congratulated her on, quote, her historic campaign. And of course, they still have a couple of key months here of governing in which they have hinted that they want to do a lot of the work, according to the Harris campaign, to shore up and try to protect some of the things that they put in place ahead of President-elect Trump taking office.
Monica, in that bit we played from the speech yesterday, we heard Harris mention this peaceful transfer of power. What are Biden administration officials telling you about how the transition is going to move forward? And also, are they going to try to get specific things done in the time they have left?
It does sound like that is their intention. And look, this is a legal process that is supposed to be carried out, the transition, and it's something that is really worked on in the minutes following a victory or a concession like what we saw yesterday. So we know that, for instance, the White House Chief of Staff, Jeff Zients, reached out to the people who are leading the Trump transition team right now to try to get some of these logistics going. And we know that for their part, the Trump campaign and transition confirmed that this took place and that during this phone call between President-elect Trump and President Biden, they committed to this transition and this peaceful transfer of power. And the other piece to all of this is that traditionally, when this happens, the president, the sitting president, invites the winner to the White House. So we know President Biden has invited Donald Trump, and it sounds like he has accepted that invitation. And so he may be coming here to Washington in the next couple of days. And this is, again, part of trying to have a, quote, what you see up there, smooth transition. And 8 years ago, this is something that then President Obama did. He invited Donald Trump. He came. But remember, guys, in 2020, that did not take place. There was not a, quote unquote, peaceful transfer of power. Instead, Donald Trump, when he lost, refused to accept the election results. So today, President Biden is really going to try to lean into restoring that tone and that contrast with 2020 to say that he wants everything to go as normally and traditionally as possible this time around. Savannah and Joe.
All right, Monica, Alba, thank you very much.
To help us unpack this election, and there are many boxes still left to unpack, let's bring in NBC News senior national reporter Jonathan Allen. John, good to have you with us. So let's start by taking a closer look at President-elect Trump's victory. We are still waiting on the results from Nevada and Arizona, but so far he's flipped 4 states, including the entire blue wall in the Midwest, every brick of that wall. How is he able to do it?
It's a great question, Joe, and good morning to you, Savannah. Nice to see you remotely after spending some time with you on set this week. Joe back in his traditional chair there after his trip to Wisconsin. I think, number one, I would just say, if you look across the board, you see Donald Trump having improved his performance sort of all over the place, whether you're talking about geographically or for most of the demographics, not all of the demographics. But overall, we're likely to see that this campaign had fewer overall voters, and Trump's share of those voters shot up. And so particularly what I would say is in rural areas and counties across the country, you saw an uptick for him. But the most glaring, of course, on a percentage basis difference was what you saw him do with Latino voters and particularly with Latino men. Latino men have long favored Democratic candidates. Donald Trump won 55% of them. Latino voters overall. You saw Trump lose them overall. He lost Latino women, but his percentage of the Latino vote, 45%, is the highest in memory for a Republican candidate. So a lot going on there, and of course a little bit of an uptick also with African Americans.
John, it was so great to have you with us, and we appreciated you spending 4 live hours across the morning with us. Let's talk now on the Democratic side. After a loss, some finger-pointing starts, a blame game, sort of, and a lot happened here for Democrats that was objectively not good news. I mean, they lost support among a lot of key demographics, a lot of key voting groups. They also lost control of the Senate. Where does the Democratic Party go from here? What happens next as they try to find a path forward?
Yeah, Savannah, I think what you're getting at there is a total butt kicking. And so, where they go is to lick their wounds a little bit and try to process what it is that they didn't do right. Now, in historical context, you look at this election and say, in the recent elections, you're talking about a significant shift, a decisive victory for Donald Trump. In the broader history of elections, we still have pretty tight, closely contested elections, even this one. Where the battlegrounds will, 4 of them have already gone to Trump. Could be that he ends up getting all 7 of them, but by relatively thin margins, a couple points here, a couple points there. And so, I think what the Democrats are going to try to do, should probably try to do, is figure out why their message isn't resonating, not just to get them to the 50% level in these swing states, but what is it that they can do to really appeal to Americans more broadly and try to get a more lasting majority the next time they have the presidency, the next time they have the Senate. And of course, the House hasn't been called yet, but they are, facing an uphill battle to get the House right now.
So, John, there are still votes being counted out there, especially out west where mail-in voting's a big deal. So it'll get some time before we get to the final total. But you mentioned this. So far, it appears far fewer people voted in this election by millions and millions. Let's look at the latest total. Vice President Harris has more than 67 million votes. That is down from the 81 million who voted for Joe Biden in 2020. Even former President Trump, now President-elect Trump, he's not quite at the numbers he reached 4 years ago when he lost. We'll see if he ends up there. What should we read into that?
It's a great question, Joe, and I think political scientists will be looking at it over the course of the next couple of years, like sort of all the reasons. My hypothesis, my biggest hypothesis is sort of two-pronged. One is the last time we had an election in 2020, there was a massive increase in voting from 2016. And so, I don't think we should have expected that we were going to see the same kind of turnout. You saw, I think the Democrats got a 24% increase in their raw vote total from 2016 to 2020. The Republicans was more like 17%. You never see anything like that. So why did that happen back then? I think for the most part, because people didn't have anything else to do. Everybody was sitting at home. People were angry about the pandemic, whether they were angry about, people dying or the economy shutting down or both of those things. There was a lot of anger in the electorate, a lot of pent-up anger, and there weren't a lot of things for people to do. There was a facility of voting in terms of the ability to vote early, vote by mail. And I think in this election, number one, you didn't have those factors. And number two, people are sick of these political parties. There's a lot of anger in the country about that. And so I think some voters who voted last time thinking that they might make some sort of permanent or lasting change had gotten fed up with it by the time this election rolled around.
John Allen, thank you so much. Great to see you again. Well, NBC News projected early Wednesday that Republicans have taken control of the Senate. Wins in West Virginia and Ohio propelled the GOP to majority control.
Democrats previously held a slim majority in the Senate and are looking to add to their House caucus with dozens of key races still up in the air. That means who controls the Speaker's chair in the House still hangs in the balance.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins us now. She's at the big board because she's multi-talented. She's going to work it for us. Ali, great to have you with us here in New York. So tell us about these key races for Republicans that gave them control here. Walk us through the path.
Look, several key races here, and it's exactly as Republican operatives told me they thought it was going to go, in large part because the states that they were looking at were out here in Montana, but also in Ohio, and those were going to be the ones, and then West Virginia down here. West Virginia was sort of an obvious pick once Senator Joe Manchin left his post there. All three of these contests I covered back in 2018, and I can tell you, the personality and the profile that these politicians cut in their home state state sort of allowed them to defy the pro-Trump trend that was happening on the ground in presidential years. But it's different when you're running in an off cycle versus one where you're sharing the ballot with former President Trump. That's ultimately the thing that felled each of these states and allowed them to flip into the Republican column, thusly turning over control of the Senate to Republicans. I do want to point out to you, though, these two states out here have a really interesting thing happening in them where both Democrats are trying to defend their seats. In the case of Senator Jackie Rosen, she is the incumbent serving there. Just look at Washoe County. This is a place where Jackie Rosen was able to survive, but President Trump was able to flip. It does sort of give a little context to the idea that although the ticket splitters didn't come out in Ohio or Montana where we knew they needed to, they might have come out there, and they also might have come out in Arizona, where you see Maricopa County, the one that we often talk about all the time. Trump won by 51%, but Ruben Gallego, who is the House member that is now competing for this once Democratic-held seat, actually was able to hold Maricopa County himself. This could be a story of ticket splitting, maybe not in the places that Democrats needed it, but also in the places that they want it to hold their majorities to a less extreme level in the Senate.
Yeah, and Allie, maybe this is a good time to ask you about that. We know Republicans will have control of the Senate, but these last few states that we're waiting on, why are they such a big deal? How big that majority is? Talk about why that could matter.
It's for exactly that reason, because you have people in these states that can continue to fill Democratic seats. Look, Democrats always knew that they were likely to lose the majority this time, but it does make it that maybe there are potentials for bipartisanship if the majorities are a little bit closer, or it could just mean that we're in for more divided government, especially when we get to talking about what's happening in the House. God, we all need some sleep, but that is going to make this an even more interesting case of Congress in Washington.
So let's talk about the House. Unclear which party is going to be in control as votes are still counted. We don't know when it will come in, but what are we watching? And what do you think about how soon we could expect a result?
We don't know when it's going to come in, especially because you see some of these places. Alaska is one that I often talk about. A lot of people vote by mail there, and there is a really hot marquee contest there where the Democrat is defending her seat against a Republican challenger. I was looking at these races yesterday as some key bellwethers that I was watching. When I left yesterday at around 6 o'clock, they weren't called. I opened up the board this morning before talking to you guys. Still not called. One that I was very eager to check, though, was this one in Iowa. A lot of attention paid to Iowa because of a poll that showed maybe Democrats were gaining traction there. Obviously, that did not ultimately happen. But this is a seat that Republicans knew they were going to have to play defense on. And it's had one of the tightest margins in House races that I've been watching over the course of the last few days. The Republican, Marionette Miller Meeks, could be in trouble, or she could just squeak out with 799 votes, 99% of the vote total there. We're going to see what ends up happening. We also used to talk about the road to the majority going through New York. Looks like it might be able to go through New York still for Republicans, especially when you see in places like New York's 19th congressional district, if Mark Molinaro and if Anthony D'Esposito on Long Island are able to hold on, then that would be a good sign for Republicans. Alternatively, 92% of the vote in this Long Island district, Laura Gillen, the Democratic challenger, is leading at this point. And then you flip over into the Hudson Valley, you see the Democratic challenger also leading there. But it's a longer road for the rest of these races to ultimately be called. Pennsylvania's 10th congressional district, for example, was one that Republicans were a little bit worried about. Scott Perry, one of the former heads of the rabble-rousing Freedom Caucus, so we talk about and follow him around the Hill a lot. He was in a closer race than expected, but it's looking like he, with 99% of the vote, might still squeak it out. I think the reality here is Democrats needed to flip 4 seats. They didn't ultimately end up being able to do that. Still some races outstanding, but it's going to be a really tough order for Democrats to take control at this point.
Allie, I know you have to go home to keep covering all this stuff, which is happening on Capitol Hill, but it's so fun to have you in New York.
I know, I've loved this.
But go cover the rabble-rousing for us.
Yeah, exactly.
The rabble-rousing needs to be covered.
Thank you, Allie. All right, stock markets surge on the news of Mr. Trump's victory, closing sharply higher on Wednesday.
Yeah, the Dow Jones logged its best day in 2 years, while the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ also hit record highs. This morning, U.S. markets are set to open slightly higher as investors await the latest interest rate decision from the Federal Reserve.
Joining us now to talk about all this, Investopedia's editor-in-chief, Caleb Silver. Caleb, good to have you with us. So these are astronomical numbers. The markets were already riding high. So why did Wall Street react so positively to this election result? How much of it is we had uncertainty, now we have certainty? How much of it is Trump won?
Yeah, I think it's both of those things. This didn't drag on for days or weeks, and having that certainty of knowing who's going to be in the White House and what the makeup, at least of the Senate, looks like, has been a pretty bullish signal for a lot of investors. And part of that is because of the promises that Trump made throughout his campaign, which is extending those tax cuts from 2017. Remember, that lowered the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. He intends to keep it there, maybe even take it lower. He's promised lower taxes for some companies. There's that, of course. There's a lot of spending being talked about through his administration, whether that's infrastructure, whether that's for defense, whether that's for deportation. So government spending also pretty bullish for stocks and for companies. But also, if you think about some of these other policies, making things in America, how he's going to maybe undo the CHIPS Act, maybe reform the Securities and Exchange Commission, less regulation. All of that is bullish signals for investors who are looking for clarity. They have it now.
We know the economy was a top issue for voters in this election. We heard it time and time again in polls in the recent future, in the not so recent future, in the recent past and the not so recent past. Among his proposals, Mr. Trump talked a lot about tax cuts, and we also have heard a lot about tariffs on imported goods. Tell us about his plans, how they might impact the consumer, and when anything like that could start to happen once he takes office.
Well, Trump has talked about imposing a 20% across-the-board tariff as soon as he takes office. That is inflationary by nature. Why? Because we will end up paying for that as consumers. Those costs get passed on to us as consumers, and it's tough for like businesses that are importing products from overseas to make their finished product to sell to us. Those costs ultimately gets passed on to consumers. That's going to actually be inflationary by nature. On the other hand, you get tax cuts. It's not just the corporate tax rate. It's extending the 2017 tax cuts, and he's talking about even more tax cuts, potentially extending or raising the child tax credit, talking about tax breaks for people at different income things. So you pick your poison here, higher tariffs or lower taxes. He and his administration are betting on lower taxes are going to keep the economy growing. But all of that is going to weigh on consumers because we still have inflation. Even though it's come down and it's slowed, it's still going to be a factor.
Okay, so Caleb, do your magic trick. How long until the Fed meeting?
That's what I called it.
Oh, come on. This is an easy one, 6 hours and 41 minutes. But it's the one in December, about 40 days, 6 hours and 41 minutes that we care about. The Fed is going to decide on interest rates today. They are most likely going to lower rates a quarter point. It's the future we care about, but the future is so uncertain because we know Trump has talked about putting the Federal Reserve underneath the executive branch. That could change the equation very much. And a lot of his policies may change the Fed's equations for what they intend to do in the future.
We call it magic. You call it math. So, Caleb Silver, thank you so much.
By the way, Brian Chung, when he was with him, admitted he can't do that. So it really is something special.
I bet there's a thing on the internet that makes that not possible. Anyway, or just ask Caleb.
Count his skills.
Or just ask Caleb.
Thanks, Caleb. All right, let's get a check on your morning news now. Weather: a fast-moving wildfire in Southern California is actually forcing thousands to flee.
Yeah, serious story there. Meteorologist Angie Lastman is here with the latest on that and the forecast. Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning to you. Yes, you're exactly right. Parts of Southern California dealing with this fire weather and the potential for that fire to spread through the day. So let me run you through. We've got 25 million people at risk with these red flag warnings up for much of Southern California, including Los Angeles and San Diego, as well as Santa Cruz stretching up into San Francisco and points north. So it's not just Southern California, it's Central California too, but we are closely watching this mountain fire that we're seeing. This is one of those fast moving fires that we've seen over the past 24 hours. 14,000 acres right now, 0% contained. You can see it's just north of Camarillo. This is going to be something we watch through the day to potentially worsen. And here's why. We've got these really strong Santa Ana winds. We're talking 60, 70, 75 plus mile per hour winds. A really aggressive Santa Ana wind event happening across this region, but we've also got very low humidity. So we know the conditions are dry. We know the winds are strong. It doesn't take much to see these fires start and then explosively spread, which is exactly what we saw yesterday. This is going to be something we will continue to watch through the day today and potentially into the next couple of days as firefighters continue to try to get this thing contained. Meanwhile, we've got a winter storm that's working across parts of the Rockies. We've got the winter alerts to prove it, and plenty of snow is expected across this region. Notice the heavy snow that's really draped for the southern and central Rockies. That's where we could potentially pick up maybe a foot or so. But also the other side of this system is rain. And this is going to be across specifically places like West Texas, where we could see some of those stronger storms today. But also we're going to see the potential for some heavy rain. Here's what we're looking for as far as the severe threat: Midland to San Angelo down to Del Rio. The potential for hail and strong wind gusts is there, but of course we can't rule out a couple of tornadoes here as the day goes on. As we get into tomorrow, the heavy rain threat shifts north. This is still going to be snow that we deal with across parts of Colorado, but we'll see this heavy kind of rain stretched across the plains here as we get through the day tomorrow. And last but of course not least, there's a lot going on weather-wise. We've got the southeast dealing with flood alerts as more of that heavy rain works across the southeast, guys, through the day today. Unfortunately, for the northeast, we really need some rain, but there is none in sight for the short term.
It's too hot here.
Too hot, and the fire weather is a concern as well. So we'll keep that trend going at least for another couple days.
All right, thank you, Angie. Appreciate it.
You're
We are
welcome.
just getting started this morning. Still ahead, the swing in how Latino men voted was one of the biggest factors in putting President-elect Trump back in the White House. We're going to dig through the data and what's behind this surge in Republican support.
But first, from the border to vaccines, what a second Trump administration could look like. That's up next.
Welcome back. As President-elect Trump is getting ready to take control of the White House for a second time. This morning, we have a look at what the next Trump administration could look like.
NBC News senior Washington correspondent Hallie Jackson breaks down the potential players and their possible roles in the new Trump term as they try to carry out his agenda.
A second Trump term poised to look like his first, controversial from the start, beginning, he says, with the mass deportations long promised.
On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history.
But few details on who would deport the estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants in the U.S. and whether families would be separated. Multiple members of Mr. Trump's first cabinet in his first term have made the case against another term, casting him as unfit to serve. But as the president-elect has remade the GOP in his image, loyal allies likely to stock the inner circle. Marco Rubio, Doug Burgum, Elise Stefanik, according to multiple sources familiar with the transition. Others in the orbit may include immigration hardliner Stephen Miller and MAGA firebrand Steve Bannon. Familiar faces alongside famous ones, including Elon Musk.
Oh, let me tell you, we have a new star. A star is born, Elon.
The Tesla and SpaceX CEO becoming a confidant of Mr. Trump's.
He doesn't want to be in the cabinet. He just wants to be in charge of cost cutting. We'll have a new position, Secretary of Cost Cutting.
Then there's Robert F. Kennedy Jr., an anti-vaccine conspiracy theorist who could end up overseeing health agencies.
I'm going to let him go wild on health. I'm going to let him go wild on the food. I'm going to let him go wild on medicines.
Our Vaughn Hilliard with Kennedy today.
You say clearing out the corruption in your terms. Would that mean clearing out the top level federal service workers that are currently at the FDA and the CDC?
In some categories, I would say.
What does that look like? Yeah.
In some categories of workers, there are entire departments, like the nutrition departments at FDA, that have to go. That are not doing their job. They're not protecting our kids.
And Mr. Trump, who's proposed eliminating the Department of Education, has made overhauling the federal government another second-term priority, backed by Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, who once said this.
Fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people.
And more recently,
I did not say fire everyone in the government. I said replace the mid-level bureaucrats with people who are responsive to the administration.
the president-elect looking to slap tariffs on imports, calling into question U.S. support of Ukraine, and promising to once again pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement. Political opponents fearing retribution after campaign comments like these.
It'll be nasty a little bit at times, and maybe at the beginning in particular.
But for President-elect Trump,
America has given us an unprecedented and powerful mandate.
Soon enough, power once again. Hallie Jackson, NBC News.
As we just heard from Hallie, President-elect Trump has promised to conduct what he calls the largest deportation program in American history on day one of his new term.
And that message resonated with more voters this year than ever before. In an NBC News exit poll from Election Day, 40% of voters across the nation said undocumented immigrants should be deported. That's a 15% jump from when Mr. Trump was first elected to the White House back in 2016.
For more on this, we're joined now by NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley. Julia, good morning. So you've reported Mr. Trump is also considering withholding federal police grants from local law enforcement, so police departments and sheriff's departments that decline to take part in those proposed massive deportations. Walk us through the basics of this. I mean, roughly how many people could be targeted? Who would carry that out?
Well, Joe, it's something they tried in the previous Trump administration, but they were blocked in courts. But when you point out the polling like that, they think now they have the firepower and a new legal strategy that could push this through. What they're talking about is withholding federal grants to sanctuary cities. Any jurisdiction, you could look at New York, for example, many in Maryland, Chicago, Colorado, places across the country, California as a state, that would not have access to this very large pot, about $250 million of federal funding that goes out to law enforcement, not just to help with cops, but also things like drug rehab programs. A lot of law enforcement agencies, especially those in underserved areas, really depend on those federal grants. And they sued in the last administration, led by New York, to say that they could not withhold these for sanctuary policies. But now, the incoming Trump administration thinks they could withhold those funds again, not only to get sanctuary cities to hand over migrants, undocumented migrants, to ICE for deportation, but actually to go out and identify anyone they think might be undocumented to be part of that mass deportation force we were talking about.
Republicans also regain control of the Senate in this election. Will hold the majority in that chamber for the first time in 4 years. Control of the House, of course, is still up in the air. But let's just say, what would full control of government mean for Trump's plans? What could it actually mean for controlling the border and any of these, proposals, theories that we talk about actually happening?
Well, it certainly would eliminate some of those checks and balances, but in large part, it would mean more funding. In fact, if you look at one of the things that Harris always complained about on the border was that Republicans stood in her way, really, stood in the Biden administration's way of passing that border security bill that would have put more people at the border. Now, if they win the House, if Republicans win the House, you could have a massive funding bill to the incoming Trump administration on immigration that could triple the size of Customs and Border Protection, Border Patrol, and ICE, that would allow them to expand detention capacity. And I still think it's a long way off to see how they would deport millions of migrants in a very short amount of time, even with that amount of money, but it would certainly get them started.
So another NBC News exit poll found a majority of voters nationwide have more trust in Mr. Trump to handle immigration. You have some new exclusive reporting that the Biden administration is making contingency plans for a possible surge in border crossings ahead of a Trump presidency. What can you tell us about that? I'm also just curious, do they think there could be a surge, or do they think that the fact that Mr. Trump could take office could actually discourage people from coming?
What they think, and it's something that we saw at the end of the Obama administration leading up to the first Trump administration, is that there could be more people who decide to come between now and when Trump is inaugurated, because they think, sometimes falsely so, that the door is simply going to close and the time is now. Sometimes we've seen smugglers exploit that in these chat groups. And in fact, we're able to watch some of the chatter there. I have some of this translated right here. People saying after the 21 of January, he will close the borders with extreme security. There's not a lot of time left. You have until January to enter. All things that people are hearing both from smugglers who are advertising their services and from the migrants considering coming. And we know this is something the Biden administration is planning for now.
All right, Julia Ainsley, always appreciate your reporting. Thank you.
Great exclusive. Well, this morning, we're getting reaction from world leaders to Trump's victory. We're hearing a lot of congratulations on his second term and also questions about how the new administration could change U.S. support in conflict zones overseas.
For more, let's bring in NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons, who joins us from Dubai. Keir, good to have you with us. Let's start in Ukraine. We know President Zelensky publicly welcoming Mr. Trump's victory. We heard Garrett report on that earlier today. But we also know the president-elect has praised Russian President Vladimir Putin and indicated he could start pulling back on support for Ukraine. So how could the U.S. relationship with Ukraine change during Trump's second term?
Oh, it's going to change. I mean, there's no question of that. And you just laid out there, Joe, why it will. I think President Zelensky has no choice but to try to lean into the relationship. It's already been a tricky relationship, of course, and there is a risk for Ukraine and for President Zelensky that it's going to get more tense. He's trying to not have that happen. He's making that phone call to President-elect Trump. He is kind of, talking about their good relationship, talking about President-elect Trump's family, giving him congratulations. But ultimately, of course, the president-elect has said that he wants to stop the war, and that he hasn't said that he's interested in returning the territory that Russia illegally invaded. It's all those years ago now. He hasn't said that he's interested in returning that. Now, all of that being said, and I think that there will very likely be a summit between the President-elect Trump and President Putin pretty early on. All of that being said, we have heard from the Kremlin today, spokesperson saying things like there is no plan for a call between President Putin and President-elect Trump. They have no knowledge of any kind of a suggestion that a Russian delegation might come to the inauguration. There could be a summit before the inauguration, but no knowledge of that. We are going to hear from President Putin himself later today in Russia, because he's scheduled to give a long Q&A with Russian intellectuals. He does it every year, and we're told by the Kremlin spokesman that will certainly touch on the election there in the US this week. So clearly, there are many in Russia who are celebrating in the Russian government, but I think from the Russian diplomats that I talked to, there is also a knowledge that President-elect Trump can be unpredictable.
Let's also talk about the reaction in Israel and Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is an enthusiastic Trump supporter. How could a second Trump administration change things with that conflict?
Yeah, I mean, look, you've got so many world leaders rushing to talk about my friend, President-elect Trump, and Benjamin Netanyahu is one of those. I mean, certainly the Israeli government thinks this was a good result for them. Even those in Israel who believe that the Netanyahu government dragged things out in order to get to this point. And he fired his defense minister on the day America was voting. And that, I was talking to Arab diplomats today, that has others in the region really concerned about what the Israelis might do in these coming weeks and months before the inauguration, because President-elect Trump has been clear that he wants to see peace. But of course, before he is president, there is time. Now, that has got people here in the region, as I say, concerned. We'll have to see.
All right, Keir Simmons, thank you very much. Well, for the first time, the U.S. is set to have a president who has been convicted of felony charges.
So what does President-elect Trump's re-election mean for his pending legal cases? We're going to sit down with an expert next.
We are back with more on the re-election of Donald Trump as we look at what's next for his ongoing legal battles on both the state and federal level.
Earlier this year, Mr. Trump was convicted on 34 counts of falsifying business records in New York, stemming from a scheme to cover up hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels. His sentencing hearing for that case set for later this month. Then there's the election interference case in Georgia, which is now tied up in appeals court issues over ethics issues.
And on the federal level, Mr. Trump has been indicted twice for trying to illegally overturn the 2020 election, allegedly, although he has not been convicted. Separately, federal prosecutors have been trying to reinstate charges over Trump's mishandling of those classified documents, which were dismissed earlier this summer. With NBC News Now legal analyst Angela Senadella joining us to break down these cases, tell us what happens next. Angela, always good to have you with us. So federal law prohibits prosecution of a sitting president. So does that mean that these federal cases disappear as soon as he becomes president? Could those be put on hold? What do we think happens?
Yes, so I believe all the federal criminal cases will indeed disappear. And with what you just said, I think it's possible to also interpret that federal law prohibits criminal prosecution of a president-elect. We've never had that before. But if you think about the separation of powers and why that's the reasoning behind this inability to prosecute a president, that could still cross-apply. Now, there's a number of different options, though, passed of how it could go away. So the current Department of Justice could self-dismiss themselves. And the argument for that is what I just said, that prosecuting a president-elect could be the same as prosecuting a sitting president. But then if those charges are still happening on day one of his presidency, he could have his attorney general just dismiss and fire Jack Smith. Or if you wanted to get really personal, he could technically repeal the federal regulations that require the attorney general to do the firing so that he himself could directly fire Jack Smith.
And of course, NBC News has reporting that it looks like the Biden administration might be the ones that actually make this happen, but we will see what happens. Let's talk about these 34 felonies in New York. He's already been convicted. We're supposed to be sentencing later this month. First of all, that sentencing, possible it could get delayed. And then if it's not delayed, what could be the punishment here?
Right. So next week, we're expected to hear from Judge Merchan about whether or not this presidential immunity ruling from the Supreme Court will actually affect this New York conviction. Now, I think he's not not going to grant Trump's defense attorney's appeal here, or their motion to dismiss based on this presidential immunity ruling. So if the ruling stays as of next week, then we do have the sentencing, which is scheduled for the end of November. Now, Trump's team has very effectively requested postponements time and time again. I believe he's going to request another postponement of the sentencing hearing. And given the reasons that Rashawn has granted postponements in the past, this is a very good one. So I believe it's possible the sentencing could almost indefinitely be postponed until after the presidency.
Or they could just say January 21st, 2029. Come on back here.
Exactly. That's possible.
Right.
Let's talk about the civil suits here in New York. One for exaggerating his net worth, then everything that happened with E. Jean Carroll, a writer who has accused him of sexual assault. The combined penalties there require him to pay $570 million. Is he off the hook for that? What happens there?
No, so not at all. So it's interesting how you laid out these questions, because first, federal criminal trials, totally gone. Now, state prosecutions on hold. These civil lawsuits, so he is fully on the hook. And there's actually precedent here. Even the appeals could continue while he is in the presidency, so long as it doesn't affect his presidential priorities. The precedent here is Paula Jones v. Clinton. And those appeals did continue because the alleged activity happened prior to the presidency. And also, it's a little well-known fact that Trump himself, during his first presidency, was forced to pay a $2 million judgment that occurred as a result of his alleged misuse of Trump Foundation funds. So same thing would apply here. He would be on the hook.
Angela, I feel like we're going to be talking to you a lot over the next few months. Thanks so much.
We want to take a closer look at one group of voters that helped President-elect Trump win in several battleground states. An NBC News exit poll shows Mr. Trump almost doubled his support from Latino men compared to the 2020 election. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Goss spoke to an election official in one predominantly Hispanic community in Pennsylvania to get more insight.
Make America great again.
Donald Trump didn't just rely on the vote that got him into the White House the first time. He expanded it, and a big push came from Latino men. NBC News exit polls show 55% of Latino men backed Trump nationwide. In 2020, it was just 36%.
First of all, Hispanics love Trump. They do.
There are some striking examples, like Starr County, Texas, the most Hispanic county in the country. Trump won there by nearly 16 points. It had gone Democratic every election since 1892. In Pennsylvania, Latinos helped deliver the critical battleground state in multiple counties.
What the economy was versus the last 4 years, they say it's a night and day difference for them. So.
We met Berks County Commissioner Michael Rivera in Reading, a Republican who is half Pennsylvania Dutch, half Puerto Rican.
The values of the Hispanic population, they're more similar to what the values are of the Republican Party.
Rivera says Latinos in Reading were more politically engaged than ever this year.
The city has a Latino population of about 68% and votes Democratic, so it may have been surprising in early June when the Trump campaign came here and set up an office. Surprising, that is, for people who don't live in Reading.
Migrant invasion.
Trump stopped here for a rally in October, and then again the night before Election Day. Commissioner Rivera even taking the stage.
Re-elect President Trump.
A final push to drive up the margins over Kamala Harris.
The mandate from Latino voters is clear. Focus on the economy, focus on bringing down prices, focus on inflation.
And with a growing population, there is growing influence on the country's politics.
We have seen that Latinos are playing this role as a last great wild card in the electorate, and they will only continue to do so.
In a tight race, a wild card can make all the difference. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News, Reading, Pennsylvania.
Coming up, time for your weekly medical checkup.
Yeah, and there's some new motivation. What else is new to squeeze in that workout? We'll tell you why up next.
We are back, and it's time for your weekly medical checkup, because you probably didn't get it in this week. This week, there is some good news for people who might find it hard to fit a workout into their busy schedules.
Of course, that's completely relatable. We're also learning about a new device that could help millions of people diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease.
NBC News medical contributor Dr. John Torres is here now. Dr. Torres, good to have you with us. So we know life can get busy. It can be hard to find time to work out, but now, no excuse. Researchers at University College London, University of Sydney found 5 minutes of exercise a day could help your health. I still don't know if I can fit that in. But, so first of all, really? And second of all, what kind of exercise can you do in that time that's meaningful?
Also, look at how the second bullet here immediately jumps to 20 minutes.
You're right.
Well, that's not what we're talking about.
And that's the big thing here. And they found out, they went back and looked at studies, and they looked at about 15,000 people that had worn these exercise monitors. And they said, let's look at the exercise, even small amounts, and see what happened. And they found out that just at 5 minutes a day, if you substitute it for something else you normally do, sitting on a couch, watching TV, just not doing much, that 5 minutes can actually drop your blood pressure. It significantly dropped your blood pressure if you got to 20 minutes. But what experts are saying is, hey, even at 5 minutes of doing exercise, and they're talking about doing something fairly vigorous, running, cycling, walking fast, hiking, those kinds of things, that even at 5 minutes can significantly help over the long term, as you want to make sure you're doing that substitution. So what are doctor's orders? Our doctor's orders are simple. You want to start small and build up. So even if you don't have much time, 5 minutes a day, Joe. You can do it. Yeah. I have faith in you.
Yes.
And then
a 5-minute hike.
Right? 5 minutes that you head to the gym for the treadmill.
Exactly. Do those small things where take the stairs, park further away, and walk into wherever you're going to shop.
Joe's
things
good
like
about
that.
taking the stairs.
Exactly.
I'm
Those
not.
can help as well.
I do like the stairs.
Also, can you imagine signing up for that study and they're like, you're in the 5 minute range. You're like, oh, heck yeah. Okay, a new study published in the journal Science, it found restricting sugar in early childhood, which seems to make sense at least a little bit if you think about parenting. It could reduce the risk of chronic disease later in life. What does this mean about the amounts of sugar for children?
And that's the interesting connection, because they're looking at early childhood and then looking into your 50s and 60s. And what they found out, they did what's called a natural study. And this was World War II. In England, they restricted sugar. They rationed it. And they only got about half the amount of sugar that they normally got. And so they looked at children and said, okay, if in the 40s and early 50s, they only got half the amount of sugar, what's happening when they're in the 2000, 2003 time frame, when they're 50, 60, 70 years old? And they found out that they actually reduced their chances of getting type 2 diabetes by 35%, reduced their chances of getting high blood pressure by 20%.
Wow.
If you got those high blood pressure or diabetes, it actually slowed down the rate at which you got them. So you got them later in life. So what are doctors' orders? Well, they're simple. Essentially, watch that sugar, especially avoid added sugars for children under the age of 2, added salt for children under the age of 1. You want to avoid those because now we know what happens in childhood affects you as an adult.
We are tight on time here, but there's research presented at the clinical trials on Alzheimer's disease found a new device stimulates the brain, could slow memory loss. What should we know?
Yeah, so it's this transcranial magnetic stimulation, the same thing they use for depression, migraines, those kinds of things. And they found out that it can actually help in small study with slowing down the progression of Alzheimer's, more so than the drugs that are used for Alzheimer's. So what are doctor's orders here? Doctor's orders are essentially, number one, even though this is still in a study phase, we're finding more things. And so getting diagnosed early is extremely important because things are coming along that can help, and lifestyle changes. We're also finding out that those are important to manage dementia, manage Alzheimer's.
Yeah, that's really important. Dr. John Torres, great to see you. Thanks
You
for
bet.
coming by. Coming up, it was an election cycle unlike any other.
After the break, we're going to take one more look back at the lead up to Tuesday's historic election. Stay with us.
Finally, this morning, the 2024 campaign was one packed with momentous firsts, full of twists and turns that few saw coming.
Here's a look back at some of the key moments from the last 2 years that will go down in history.
In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
That is 34 felony counts here, all guilty verdicts.
This is unprecedented for a former American president to be criminally convicted.
This was a rigged, disgraceful trial.
I'm still the only person to ever beat Donald Trump. My memory is fine. If we finally beat Medicare.
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
This night got off to a tough start for President Biden.
I think it's a legitimate question to say, is this an episode or is this a condition?
The 45th president of the United States, injured but alive.
All of this unfolding with Republicans now gathering to officially nominate Donald Trump at their convention.
I stand before you in this arena only by the grace of Almighty God.
News broke of different Democratic leaders calling for the president to step aside.
My fellow Americans, I revere this office, but I love my country more.
We choose freedom.
Is a fight for the future.
I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black.
I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else.
The government and Donald Trump certainly should not be telling a woman what to do with her body.
I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
I'm going to do it whether the women like it or not. I'm going to protect them.
Your vote is your voice, and your voice is your power.
We're now less than 2 hours away from the first polls closing.
It's 9:30 in the East. The vote counting coming in. Donald Trump with 214. Harris now with 145. So things certainly becoming a little more interesting as the evening progresses.
You get into the crowd here, it's particularly quiet in terms of their sense of optimism right now.
Optimistic atmosphere both here at West Palm Beach and at Mar-a-Lago.
We kept seeing the same thing. Underperform, underperform, underperform. Is that the story?
The story is he overperformed in the rural areas. She underperformed in the urban areas, in the big cities and the counties. She needed to win.
Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, the projected winner there, former President Trump. In Georgia, former President Trump, the projected winner there. North Carolina, Donald Trump also the projected winner there. There's the map, Kate.
Yeah, there it is. A lot of red on that map. We are now projecting that the next president of the United States is Donald Trump.
I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president.
While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign.
I will not rest until we have delivered the strong, safe, and prosperous America that our children deserve and that you deserve.
Quite the year, to put it mildly. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
The news continues right now.
Top of the hour, coming to you on the heels of another historic decision day in America that saw Donald J. Trump clinch his second stay at the White House after a stunning swing state sweep.
This is a magnificent victory for the American people that will allow us to make America great again.
Vice President Kamala Harris officially conceding a hard-fought and sometimes brutal election yesterday while promising supporters this is not the end of the line.
Sometimes the fight takes a while. That doesn't mean we won't win. Don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. Don't ever stop trying to make the world a better place. You have power. You have power.
So what might Trump's second term look like? We've got team coverage focusing on all angles of his new administration, plus a closer look at the balance of power on Capitol Hill as the nation enters a new era. Good morning. Good to have you with us. Thanks for joining us on another consequential day. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers.
We begin this hour with President-elect Donald Trump set to return to power in January after that decisive victory over Vice President Harris.
Yeah, Mr. Trump broke through the so-called blue wall, states to pull off his stunning victory and take back the White House. He also flipped Georgia, a state Joe Biden won 4 years ago. President Biden has invited Mr. Trump to the White House to formally begin the transition. NBC's Garrett Haake has the latest from West Palm Beach, Florida.
Donald Trump declared victory yesterday morning, his transition getting fully underway soon afterwards. The president-elect meeting with staff and allies, taking calls with foreign leaders yesterday, even as the shockwaves from his decisive victory continued around the country.
This morning, the 45th president is poised to become the 47th, with Donald Trump pulling off what may be the biggest comeback in modern American politics.
This was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time.
President Biden calling Trump yesterday and inviting him to a White House meeting to, quote, ensure a smooth transition. The president-elect also holding phone calls with foreign leaders, including Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine and Xi Jinping of China. With votes still being counted, Trump is in a position to potentially sweep all 7 battleground states, including the Democratic blue wall of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, becoming the first Republican in 20 years to win the national popular vote. The president's eldest son, Donald Trump Jr., reveling in his victory overnight.
The other side likes to talk about, they're the unity party, but we've actually brought people from across the aisle. We've brought people from different walks of life.
Trump expanding his coalition from 2016, winning men and first-time voters, and growing his support among working-class Americans. with a 17-point swing to Trump among those making under $100,000 a year versus President Biden in 2020. Trump making some gains with black voters in swing states and notching significant Latino support, especially among men.
This is a window of opportunity for the Republican Party to actually solve problems, expand and welcome more people in the party if they want to be able to maintain this.
According to a New York Times analysis, more than 90% of counties with nearly complete results shifted toward Trump on Tuesday.
America has given us an unprecedented and powerful mandate.
Trump's victory coming after 2 assassination attempts and multiple criminal charges against him, to which he has pled not guilty, also a felony conviction in New York. Eric Trump saying overnight those cases only strengthened his support.
The American people saw through it. They didn't buy it. And Donald Trump is more popular than ever before, and none of the things that they throw at him today, they don't stick.
And now the Department of Justice is evaluating how best to wind down those remaining criminal cases against Donald Trump. That's according to 2 people familiar with the matter. And it's in keeping with the DOJ's longstanding policy that a sitting president cannot be prosecuted.
Garrett, thank you so much.
With Mr. Trump set to return to the Oval Office in just over 2 months, his second term could look dramatically different. So what can we expect from him on day one, and who's likely to serve in the next Trump cabinet? NBC News senior White House correspondent, News Now anchor Hallie Jackson takes a closer look.
Hey there, good morning to you. The president-elect and his team are pivoting from the crunch of the campaign to the business of governing, working out who his inner circle will be at the White House and what he'll do when he gets there. For President-elect Trump's first moments in the White House, he's been crystal clear and controversial.
On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history.
With an estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants in the U.S.,
we will seal the border, stop the invasion.
No specifics yet on how to pay for mass deportations, who would carry them out, or whether families would be separated. Other top to-do list tasks for the president-elect: expand oil drilling.
We're going to drill, baby, drill.
Put a tariff on Chinese-made goods. Implement a laundry list of tax breaks that some experts say could balloon the deficit.
No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax for our great seniors on Social Security benefits.
And fulfill a pledge to quickly end the war in Ukraine, with critics concerned about an emboldened Russia seizing territory.
Within 24 hours, that war will be settled. It'll be over.
Mr. Trump's first term saw the most cabinet turnovers in decades, more than 20 people in 4 years, 4 chiefs of staff, 2 attorneys general, 2 defense secretaries, and 2 secretaries of Homeland Security. This time around, Mr. Trump's likely to lean on loyalists. Multiple sources familiar with the transition say those under consideration for top roles include Doug Burgum, Linda McMahon, and Marco Rubio.
Do you intend to serve in the Trump administration? Is that something you've talked to the former president about?
No, we haven't talked about that. Those are decisions they'll start working through right now.
And the world's richest man, now a close confidant.
And I'm saying only Elon can do this. It must be an Elon.
Elon Musk, CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, poised to advise Mr. Trump on how to overhaul parts of federal government.
We'll have a new position, Secretary of Cost Cutting, okay? Elon wants to do that.
And anti-vaccine conspiracy theorist Robert F. Kennedy Jr. could end up overseeing health agencies.
I'm going to let him go wild on health. I'm going to let him go wild on the food. I'm going to let him go wild on medicines.
I'm not going to take away anybody's vaccines.
Kennedy, with NBC's Vaughn Hilliard, laying out his potential plan for the FDA.
In some categories of workers, there are entire departments, like the nutrition departments at FDA, that have to go, that are not doing their job. They're not protecting our kids.
NBC News has reached out to Musk about a possible advisory role. No response yet. With a caveat here as we talk transition, as always, nothing is final on any cabinet position until it's announced by Mr. Trump himself. We should also note that when it comes to military positions, multiple sources say the expectation at the Pentagon is that whoever ends up the new defense secretary would implement what one Trump ally described as a purge across the board there, replacing military officials with generals that Mr. Trump believes would be more aligned with his goals. Back to you.
All right, Hallie, thank you.
Well, President Biden will address Americans later this morning as he prepares to make way for a new administration. It all comes as Democrats try to figure out what went wrong. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has more on how the Biden camp is getting ready for the transfer of power.
President Biden is planning to deliver remarks about the upcoming transition later today from the Rose Garden, and he's expected to stress the importance of a smooth transfer of power and working to bring the country together. This morning, for Democrats, Vice President Harris's resounding defeat is still sinking in.
While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign.
The vice president's concession speech at her alma mater, Howard University, moving her running mate Tim Walz and some supporters to tears.
Hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright. As long as we never give up and as long as we keep fighting.
It was a brief but historic campaign. Harris taking over the Democratic ticket barely 3 months ago. President Biden releasing a written statement calling her a tremendous partner, both saying they'd help with the transition.
A fundamental principle of American democracy is that when we lose an election, we accept the results.
But within the Democratic Party, a difficult post-mortem is already underway.
Democrats have to do some real soul searching. We can't just go in and talk to people a month before the election and take them for granted. A lot of people are tired of being taken for granted.
Exit polls show 3/4 of voters felt dissatisfied or angry about the way things are going in the country today. Independent Senator Joe Manchin saying Trump and Republicans appealed to centrist voters.
That's the middle. The power of the middle is unbelievable. I just hope when they get to Washington, they remember how they got there.
Some Democrats urging the party to move to the center, like New York Congressman Richie Torres, who posted Donald Trump has no greater friend than the far left, which has managed to alienate historic numbers of Latinos, blacks, Asians, and Jews from the Democratic Party with absurdities like defund the police or from the river to the sea or Latinx. President-elect Trump dominated the vote with working-class Americans and those without a college education, while Vermont Senator and former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders blasted Democratic leadership, writing it should come as no great surprise that a Democratic Party which has abandoned working-class people would find that the working class has abandoned them. Democrats are doing a lot of soul searching right now. Some say the Harris campaign and the Biden administration turned to immigration too late in the race. And some are also second-guessing the vice presidential pick of Tim Walz and whether Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro might have helped deliver that key battleground, even though she may end up losing every swing state. Still, many in the party are asking a deeper question of how Trump was able to win over so much of what was once their core base of support among minority communities.
All right, Gabe, thank you so much for that report. Well, President Biden is expected to address the nation at 11 a.m. Eastern from the Rose Garden.
Republicans have captured the majority in the Senate, but this morning we're still waiting to see which party will control the House, with votes still being counted in dozens of states. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles has more.
Overall, it was not a great night for Democrats on election night, but as the votes continued to roll in, there were some bright spots, and a path remains for them to take control of the House. But even though Democrats will have a voice, Republicans will be running the show.
Congress is going to look a lot different next year. For the first time in 4 years, Republicans are poised to take control of the Senate, flipping Democratic seats in Montana, Ohio, and West Virginia, while holding the state of Texas.
The results tonight, this decisive victory, should shake the Democrat establishment to its core.
But while their victories have guaranteed a majority, Democrats were able to limit the losses by picking up wins in blue wall states Donald Trump won. Incumbent Tammy Baldwin survived in Wisconsin, and Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin held on to an open seat in Michigan.
Tens of thousands of Michiganders voted for Donald Trump and Alyssa Slotkin on the same ballot. And it is my responsibility to get things done for Michiganders, no matter who's in office.
In the House, the picture is less clear. A couple dozen seats remain uncalled, and Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries, who would be the first black speaker of the House should Democrats take the majority, arguing the House is still very much in play and adding we must count every vote. But the remaining map favors Republicans, and the current House Speaker Mike Johnson expressed confidence he would keep his job.
We're going to have enough numbers to run the agenda through the House and the Senate
And President Trump is going to be a transformational president.
But no matter what, the margins will be tight, and Democrats are already vowing to keep a check on the new administration at every turn.
Even though the counting is still ongoing, the new Congress plans to organize quickly. Both the House and Senate preparing to begin their leadership elections as soon as next week. Back to you.
Ryan, thank you.
Well, this morning, U.S. stock markets are poised to open slightly higher ahead of the Federal Reserve's upcoming interest rate decision.
It all comes after three major stock markets surged to record highs on Wednesday following Mr. Trump's election win.
NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans joins us to explain all this. Hey, Christine, good morning. So walk us through just how happy Wall Street was about this and why. Is it Trump? Is it that the election's over? What is it?
Exactly. I'm so glad you brought that up. There's now just no uncertainty about what's going on, and markets hate uncertainty. There had been a feeling that maybe you could have days or weeks of legal challenges and uncertainty with just how a photo finish this election was going to be. So that's one reason. The other reason is there are a couple of pillars of his economic plans, or his proposed, what he has said he will do about the economy, that Wall Street loves. Cutting taxes. That means companies have a lower tax bill. That means they make more money. What happens to their money? Well, they give it back to shareholders, and that's the stock market, right? The other thing is deregulation, much more deregulation, especially for small cap stocks. So small companies, they really had a good day yesterday. Why? Well, when you cut regulation, that's a big expense for small companies. When they have fewer regulations about the environment or about labor or about the things that they're doing in their business, then they make more money. So this is about companies making more money. That is what Wall Street reflects.
Let's talk more about Trump's economic plans and what it would mean not for Wall Street, but for everyday Americans.
Sure.
What impact could it have on them?
And it also could have an impact on Wall Street as well. You know, right now, Wall Street is ignoring mass deportations. That he has promised that will be something he will do very, very early in his second tenure. So that's something that could hurt construction and could hurt farming. He does want tax cuts, though. So we have his 2017 tax cuts expire in 2025. So Congress and the president will have to come up with a new tax strategy. He wants to cut taxes for companies. Again, good for Wall Street, but also make sure that those middle-class tax cuts that he put in before stay in. Another couple of taxes he promised on the campaign trail, but hasn't said how he would pay for them. Social Security beneficiaries who pay taxes on those benefits, he would get rid of those taxes. And also tipped workers. He would say that for people who have a tipped wage, you wouldn't have to pay taxes on those tips. Some tipped workers say they'd rather just have a higher minimum wage and not be in that whole tipped wage world, especially since because of inflation, so many people are tired of being asked to tip everywhere. So tipped wage workers are really in a tough spot. Many of them would rather not have tip-free wages, but have just a higher overall wage.
People are tipping less, it seems like, recently?
Yeah, they really are. And in some cases, you have tip wage workers who are working in restaurants that now are doing a lot of counter service. And people are tired of being asked all the time, every time you turn around to tip.
I will say, though, on the trail, young voters, like in college towns that are in those roles working at a restaurant, I heard so much about how they loved his no tax on tips plan. So it did stick in terms of messaging.
Exactly. And it shows you how many people are living paycheck to paycheck, where a few dollars really, really matters. When we saw all of those exit polls yesterday, guys, I mean, you really have a huge number of Americans who think they are living in an inflation hellscape. I mean, they really do. We asked people, are you worse off today? 46% of people said they were worse off today. That's the highest number in NBC News exit polling going back decades. Wow. So that's a big, big number. So inflation really wore people down, and that is now the president-elect has said he would end inflation right away. We know that inflation is now about 2.4%, and the Fed is expected to cut interest rates today because it has been making progress on inflation.
Let's talk about what we could see today and how plans maybe for future cuts are impacted now that we know who the president is.
I don't think knowing who the president is changes the strategy of the Fed at the moment. The Fed is watching how inflation is doing and how the economy is doing. The economy has been doing well. And I know that those people who were voting yesterday didn't believe that, or 2 days ago didn't believe that. But the economy has been doing well, almost 3% economic growth. So the Fed has to be careful about not cutting interest rates too much. Otherwise, you could have inflation come back. So it's the Fed that is really the architect of getting inflation under control, less the White House, unless this is a White House that is spending, cutting taxes. That could be inflationary, too. And also
tariffs, too, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much. Tariffs could be inflationary, especially for those young workers you're talking about. When you have tariffs on 10% on everything, 60% on Chinese imports, those are disproportionately borne by lower income people because prices go up for things that they buy.
Christina, I have a feeling you're headed right out of here into a train or something like that.
I'm going to the Fed meeting, yes.
Thank you for stopping by before you head out.
You're welcome.
Now to a dangerous situation unfolding in California. A wildfire has exploded near Los Angeles, destroying more than 14,000 acres, dozens of homes. Now it's forcing thousands of people to evacuate. NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin is on the ground for us with the latest. Dana, good morning.
Joe, good morning. The full scope of the damage has yet to be realized, but there are dozens of homes that look like this. And we've seen power crews coming by trying to shut off the gas lines to homes that have already burned to the ground. That is what's fueling this flare up that we're seeing behind us. Now, the driver of this intense wildfire, Santa Ana winds, and that occurs when desert air moves east to west from the coast, from the mountain, that is, to the coast. This morning, a massive, fast-moving wildfire tearing through communities across Southern California. Santa Ana winds up to 70 miles an hour, fueling the flames of the mountain fire. When you take a look back at that hillside, what are you thinking right now?
That's what I just left. That's what I just left. And if I can get back up there, I would.
The inferno rendering water relief efforts from choppers ineffective. Firefighters also dealing with limited visibility because of thick clouds of smoke. The blaze prompting evacuation orders throughout Ventura County, just north of Los Angeles.
Firefighters were right off the bat engaged in pulling people out of their houses and saving lives.
The mountain fire rapidly torching 10,000 acres and growing, leaving multiple people hospitalized and threatening homes and businesses. Crews, including dozens of volunteers, working around the clock to extinguish the flames.
Resources are actively engaged right now in life safety and property conservation.
State officials say the fire started early Wednesday, quickly crossing a freeway and wreaking havoc in residential areas. Less than an hour south of the mountain fire, another fire breaking out near Malibu. That blaze leading to a temporary shelter-in-place order with dozens of acres burned and at least 3 homes damaged before emergency crews were able to put it out. Fire and law enforcement officials urging evacuees to remain patient.
Please continue to stay out of the area unless you absolutely need to be here. Please stay away.
Overnight, the fire grew to 14,000 acres, 0% containment at this time, and new evacuation orders were issued. Officials warn residents if you are told to evacuate, this is not the fire to try to wait it out. Joe?
All right, thank you so much, Dana.
All right, for more on all this, let's get a closer look at your Morning News Now weather.
Meteorologist Angie Lastman is here. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Let's stick with that same trend of talking about those wildfires out west. We've got 26 million people under these fire alerts right now. That strong Santa Ana wind event is going to stick with us. You can see parts of Central California, Southern California under those red flag warnings now. Those are going to last through the day today. I wouldn't be surprised if they're extended. We, of course, are watching this mountain fire just north of Camarillo. This is the one that Dana just mentioned, 14,000 acres, 0% contained. And unfortunately, the conditions don't look to improve all that much through the day today. So how rapidly this spread yesterday likely will be something that firefighters contend with today. We've got winds, not just, 30, 40 miles per hour, which already can spread fire quickly. We've got 60, 70, 75 mile per hour Santa Ana winds that are going to continue across this region through the day today. Where you see that brighter purple, those are 40 mile per hour winds, but notice 50, 60. I mean, this is going to be something we'll watch through the day today, especially considering that we've also got low humidity. So you add those things together. It's basically the ingredients that you need to see explosive fire weather conditions, which is exactly what we have on the West Coast today. We've also got winter alerts for the middle of the country, specifically the Rockies. That's where you're going to see a heavy snowfall event. We could see 12 to maybe 36 inches by the time this is all said and done. And on the front side of that system and to the south, we've got the heavy rain and the potential for some strong storms, specifically in parts of Texas, Midland, and points south to the border. Hail, winds, those are going to be our main threats, but we, of course, can't rule out a couple of isolated tornadoes, so heads up about that through the afternoon hours today. Tomorrow, we're not done with this system. It's still going to be potent. It's going to bring us more of that heavy snow across Colorado. Difficult travel is possible. We're also going to see the chance for that heavy rain across the plains, leaving us with the potential for some flooding. You can see the highest amounts centered really across Texas and Oklahoma, but we'll watch for the flooding potential as we get into tomorrow. Speaking of flooding, let's go to the southeast, where we've got flood alerts up from South Carolina to Florida. That's because of this system, bringing some heavy rain to folks there. You might be wondering if the Northeast has any rain in sight, guys. Unfortunately, it doesn't. That's going to be something that we have to wait a little longer about. But we also have a Category 2 hurricane happening just to the west of the Keys. That's going to move into the Gulf of Mexico and continue to weaken.
It will weaken.
Yes, it will weaken over the next couple of days.
That kind of like a negative, but
well, you know, there's so much to talk about today.
Right.
I tried to put it in there.
She's not feeling the vibes.
It is
right
going to
now.
weaken over the next few days. We'll still watch it into Monday, but it'll spend most of its time over the Gulf, and then we won't be worrying about it much longer.
All right. Thank you, Angie.
Good
You got it.
Thank you. Much more to come here on Morning News Now. A little later, I'll dig into how the youth played into Trump's red wave that ultimately punched his ticket back to the White House.
But first, after the break, how does Mr. Trump's win impact those long-standing criminal cases against him? Well, the DOJ is now weighing in. That's next. Stay with us. Welcome back this morning. Two people familiar with the matter have told NBC News the Justice Department is working to wind down President-elect Trump's federal criminal cases before he takes office in January.
Yeah, that's to follow a longstanding policy that says officials can't prosecute a sitting president. NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian joins us now. Ken, good morning. So remind us about these federal cases against Mr. Trump and now what the Justice Department's plan is now that he is the president-elect.
Good morning, Savannah and Joe. Yeah, these are two hugely consequential federal cases that could have landed Mr. Trump in prison for many, many years had he been convicted, had he lost the election. But that's not how it's going to play out. The first case accused Mr. Trump of violating laws relating to classified documents when he kept all those secret documents at his home in Mar-a-Lago. And then, more consequentially, he was accused of obstructing justice and ordering his subordinates to destroy evidence when the federal investigators were trying to get those documents back. And then, of course, the second federal case involves his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. The Justice Department, and remember, this is an independent special counsel, Jack Smith, a career prosecutor, accused him of violating several laws, conspiring against the United States, and lying about fraud in the election. And so what the Justice Department is saying now, and this is a bit of a surprise, is that even before he takes office on January 20th, they're going to try to wind down these cases, respecting that doctrine that a sitting president can't be prosecuted. There were some people who thought that special counsel Jack Smith would keep litigating right up until the moment he was fired by Donald Trump or ordered to stand down by a new attorney general. But that is not how the DOJ is intending to proceed here. It's not clear how it's going to play out, but they are in talks right now about how to get Mr. Trump out of these cases.
So, Ken, there were two other defendants in the classified documents case who were charged with helping Mr. Trump hide the documents. They are not going to be the president. What's going on there?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting situation, right? Because that case has been dismissed, but the Justice Department is appealing that ruling. And you're right, those two men, the two Donald Trump's employees who are charged with helping him conspire, they are not subject to this DOJ policy. So it's likely that the DOJ would try to continue with that prosecution. They also would really like the appeals court to rule on that ruling by Judge Cannon, which they disagree with, which challenged the way they appointed the special counsel in this case. So it may be that Donald Trump is dismissed from that case, but it continues on with those two co-defendants.
And Ken, what about on the state level? So we know President-elect Trump is set for a sentencing hearing later this month. That's following his New York hush money conviction. He also has that election interference case in Georgia. Do those stand?
Well, they stand for now, but the Georgia case is mired in complexity and appeals, and it looks like it's not going anywhere. In terms of the sentencing in New York, Donald Trump's lawyers are going to ask Judge Merchan to essentially not sentence him because he's going to become the president, and they're going to ask him to either dismiss the case or put it on hold. And there's every chance that he may do that. But of course, it's up to the discretion of the judge. Donald Trump has been convicted in that case. But really interesting thing is that he's not technically a convicted felon under New York law until the judge passes sentence and enters judgment. So a lot depends here on what Judge Merchan decides to do in New York.
An important note there. Not supposed to call him a felon until you're actually sentenced. All right, Ken, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Coming up, the younger voters who helped seal Donald Trump's victory.
Yeah, after the break, I'll dig into what the data tells us about what motivated under 30s and first-time voters this time around. That's up next. We're back now with a closer look at the battle for black voters in this election. Exit polls show that VP Kamala Harris had more support from African Americans, but President-elect Trump made enough gains within that bloc to help him win several battleground states this time around. One of those was Wisconsin, where NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster spoke to black voters on what led to their decision.
It's a group of voters that was the focus of both presidential campaigns.
I love the black population of this country. I've done so much for the black population of this country.
From visits to black churches to specific policy proposals, President-elect Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris repeatedly made direct appeals to African Americans.
Something that is critically important is to see black folks, and in particular black men, as a whole human being.
Across the country on Election Day, Harris received almost the same amount of support from black voters as President Biden did in 2020. But NBC News exit polls show that Trump made some inroads, gaining ground among black voters in North Carolina and more than doubling his support from black voters in Wisconsin.
Is it easier to wear that hat here now than it was before?
It is. It absolutely is.
In Milwaukee, we met 26-year-old small business owner Giovanni Jefferson, who says Trump's message on the economy and immigration stood out to him.
The extra money in my pocket aside, I think what is most important is getting that southern border closed down. There's been way too many people.
But for many of the voters we talked to after braving early voting lines, it was Harris's message that won them over.
She out there is for those that needed her. We in need of her.
Well, it's different because it's a black woman that's running to be president.
The Democratic Party now trying to understand shifts in its core coalition.
Our thanks to Shaq Brewster for that report. Well, Wisconsin had voted for Democratic candidates in every presidential election since 1988 until Mr. Trump narrowly flipped it in his favor back in 2016.
So both presidential campaigns spent much of their time and money in pursuit of younger voters, a bloc that does traditionally support Democrats. In this election, it was the message from the 45th and soon-to-be 47th president that did capture the hearts of many first-time voters. Exit polls show that more first-time and young voters showed up for Mr. Trump in his race against VP Harris than they did when Mr. Trump ran against President Joe Biden 4 years ago. Savannah, you've been tracking this youth vote throughout the entire election. First of all, we'll just talk about why. We know overall Vice President Harris did win the youth vote, but that Trump cut into that. VP Harris underperformed there. Why is that? What was going on?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we can first pull up, because right there we were just, we're talking about first-time voters and young voters. Different type of subset here. I think we can pull up the numbers on the youth vote here, where you can see that Harris did still win this vote between ages 18 and 29, 54% for Vice President Harris, 43% for now President-elect Trump. What really happened here, and the margins that were super important, were in some of those battleground states. So, for example, in Michigan, President-elect Trump did actually win the youth vote, according to our NBC News exit polls. That's a big deal. It can't be overstated how big of a deal that is, just because historically, even if you're cutting into those margins, the Democratic candidate ends up taking the youth vote. Not the case in all-important Michigan. In Wisconsin, tied that youth vote, same within North Carolina. So all these states that we're talking about, and notably also those ones that we were able to call earlier on in the night, he did really make gains in the youth vote when you're talking about that particular blue wall area. Now, if we want to talk about first-time voters, the difference here is first-time voters, 57% of them are under the age of 30. But this is somebody who could have been eligible for quite some time, and this election just brought them out. And we can pull that number up again. In this particular area, he did actually, he won. He took this. President-elect Trump, 56% of those first-time voters, according to our exit poll, just to Harris's 43%. I actually heard from a lot of young voters across the country who told me that they were eligible in 2020 and did not vote, but then they decided to come out this time around based on some of the messaging that they had heard from now President-elect Trump, which kind of gets at those numbers.
And, of course, overall, voting way down over 2020. Right. So to motivate those people who hadn't voted before, that is an interesting trend. We know overall we've been talking about the gender gap at all ages. How does that look with younger people? I have to presume, depending on whether you're male or female, the issues that matter to you are different.
Yes, so actually the gender gap absolutely exists here, but I think there's actually a story on both sides of this. So we can pull up some of the numbers here, but we had been talking for a long time about how President-elect Trump was doing a lot of work appealing directly to young men. We'll talk about how in just a minute. But what happened here was, this is nationwide, 18 to 29. Again, we just saw this. This is what Harris won, 54%. But when it came to young men, he essentially tied that number. Again, a pretty big deal. He did not, even in that case, win it, but just the gains that he was able to make there really did a lot here. So first-time voters, he actually did win this, 63%. I was talking about the youth specifically, but 63% going for President-elect Trump there. When we talk about women, he also enjoyed more support than he did. He outperformed his own performance in 2020. Biden had more of that support of young women than Harris did as well. But what he did with young men is super interesting.
How did he do it? What was the strategy the Trump campaign had to try and actually motivate those young men who might not have even voted had they not been motivated hearing him?
Yeah, it was an interesting strategy, and it was a pointed one. We talked a lot about in the last couple of weeks of the campaign how it didn't even really seem like Trump was trying to cut into Harris's gains when it came to women. And that is essentially true. He decided to double down on young men. Really specifically, podcasts. His podcast game was strong. His son, who is a first-time voter, college student, Barron, here at NYU in New York, he essentially acted as his dad's unofficial podcast advisor, saying, go on Joe Rogan, go on Logan Paul's podcast. Interestingly, we heard from a lot of young men when they were in line for the polls saying, hearing him on Joe Rogan is why I'm here tonight.
One of the big questions with young voters, I think, is I feel like they're not getting good information. I feel like their sources are not vetted. They're going with rumors.
Sure.
So that's going to be a huge issue coming forward as well.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for digging in, Savannah.
Absolutely.
We appreciate it. Now, on top of a historic election and unprecedented campaigns, Vice President-elect J.D. Vance is also making history. He will be the third youngest VP to ever serve in the White House. NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns has more on the role he played in the campaign.
After only 2 years of serving in the Senate, J.D. Vance is stepping into the vice presidency and offering a potential preview of the future of the Republican Party.
J.D. Vance is the vice president-elect and potentially the heir apparent to the MAGA movement.
And I think that we just witnessed the greatest political comeback in the history of the United States of America.
At 40, Vance will be one of the youngest VPs in history.
He's turned out to be a good choice.
A choice pushed by Trump's sons, part of the campaign's strategy to appeal to young, right-leaning men.
That he's someone who understands that cycle of poverty and addiction. He broke through it. He's living the ultimate American dream.
But Vance has come under fire for some of his views, including refusing to back down on baseless comments about migrants eating pets in Springfield, Ohio.
I'm not repeating them because I invented them out of thin air. I'm repeating them because my constituents are saying these things are happening.
And these resurfaced comments from 2021.
We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies.
The Ohio native rose to national prominence after writing the bestseller Hillbilly Elegy and underwent a transformation from never Trumper.
I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him.
To Trump running mate.
I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been.
An effective communicator on the trail, Vance, the consummate attack dog, constantly doing interviews.
So let's send somebody we can trust. Let's send Donald J. Trump back to the White House.
The Senate seat he won 2 years ago will now need to be filled, while as VP, Vance has said he wants to be, quote, involved in everything.
Now, Vance will likely stay in the Senate until closer to Inauguration Day. Then Ohio Governor Mike DeWine will tap his successor until a special election can be held in 2026.
All right, Dasha, thank you.
Coming up, our continuing coverage of the 2024 election and what we can expect from a second Trump presidency.
After the break, a closer look at the mark that Melania Trump might make on the White House this time around. It's next. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at what's making financial headlines in the wake of Election Day. Automakers are bracing for major changes to the industry.
CNBC's Bertha Coombs has that and some other money headlines. Bertha, good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. That's right. Automakers are bracing for President-elect Trump to impose new tariffs on cars made and shipped from Mexico and other countries, and to reverse existing pro-electric vehicle policies. Trump has said he would start rescinding EPA and government vehicle rules on his first day in office, and is considering eliminating EV tax breaks and incentives. That could give automakers more flexibility to build more gas-powered trucks and SUVs, which for many of them is are more profitable. Meantime, Nissan, Japanese automaker, plans to cut 9,000 jobs worldwide and reduce production by 20%. Nissan will also sell part of its stake in Mitsubishi. Nissan has been overhauling its global strategy for the past year. Like other rivals, it is battling a drop in sales in China and the U.S., which are the world's top two automakers. Meantime, Trump's election wins sparking a record $64 billion combined gain for the world's 10 richest people. The Bloomberg Billionaires Index shows that Tesla CEO and Trump supporter Elon Musk was the biggest gainer, adding more than $26 billion, with Amazon founder Jeff Bezos and Oracle chairman Larry Ellison also among the top gainers. It's the biggest daily increase in that index since it was formed back in 2012. Back over to you.
All right, Bertha, thanks so much. Good to see you.
When Donald Trump returns to the White House as president, his wife Melania will also begin her second stint as First Lady. NBC News Daily anchor Kate Snow joins us now with more on what 4 years of Mrs. Trump by her husband's side could look like. Kate, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. As Melania Trump herself writes in a recent memoir, the role is undefined, unpaid, highly visible, and subject to scrutiny. As for what she'll do this time around, we're taking a look at the past to predict the future. When President Donald Trump returns to the White House for another term in January, Melania Trump will reprise her role as First Lady.
I want to also thank my beautiful wife, Melania, First Lady.
The first 4 years she spent in the White House giving us clues about what a second stint might look like for the wife of the now 47th U.S. president.
Please welcome our next Commander-in-Chief, my husband, President Donald J. Trump.
Melania Trump took pride in overseeing extensive renovations at the White House, writing in her recent memoir, "These projects, executed quietly and without fanfare, were my part of contributing something lasting and beautiful to the American people." She also writes, as First Lady, she was committed to using her platform for the greater good. She created her Be Best initiative to fight online bullying and expanded it to help children affected by the opioid epidemic.
My Be Best initiative was inspired by compassion, strength, and kindness.
After leaving the White House, she created Fostering the Future, an organization that gives scholarships to children in the foster care system. Last month, she told Fox Business if her husband won the election, she would continue that initiative.
I will expand that and add more staff. I have more ideas.
Mrs. Trump often broke with tradition during her husband's first term in office, remaining in New York City for several months after her husband took office with their then 10-year-old son Barron as he finished school. This time, she's expected to move between the White House, Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, and Trump Tower in Manhattan, with now 18-year-old Barron attending college at NYU and living at Trump Tower.
As unconventional as a first lady as her husband is as a president. She's not going to be fit into a box, and she's not going to do what's expected of typical traditional first ladies.
Something she may not be looking forward to as a first lady, the intense media attention she says she received. She famously wore this jacket with the words, "I really don't care, do you?" returning from a trip to a migrant child detention center. Mrs. Trump later telling ABC News it was a message for the media.
And it was for the people and for the left-wing media who are criticizing me, and I want to show them that I don't care.
Though some see her as a reluctant half of a political power couple, she takes the role of First Lady seriously.
Does it ever kind of have these moments where, how did I get here?
Yeah, it's an incredible journey, an incredible story. You never know what can happen in life.
So, Kate, I have to ask, Melania wrote in her book, then posted a video online very recently voicing her support for abortion rights. What do we know about her advocacy behind the scenes?
You know, she's so private, Joe, but in her memoir, she writes that she does have occasional political disagreements with her husband, but she believes in addressing them privately. She says she was actually blindsided by the Trump policy that separated immigrant children from their families. She said she told the president it shouldn't be happening and that it had to stop, and then the policy changed soon after that, she says. It's also clear from her memoir that she really enjoyed traveling as First Lady, hosting formal events with world leaders, all those sort of traditional roles of a First Lady, Joe.
All right, Kate, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Let's stay on the election. So for the second time in history, a woman was the Democratic nominee. And for the second time, voters rejected that option.
Back on Tuesday, our Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joined the show to talk about whether our country was ready for the ultimate glass ceiling to be shattered. Ali is, of course, an expert in this topic, the author of the book. She wrote the book, Electable: Why Hasn't America Put a Woman in the White House Yet?
Well, we know what happened next, so we want to check back in with Ali. She's here with us. Good morning. So, I mean, this question in your title still stands, but did you see any signs that America is progressing toward choosing a woman eventually?
Yeah, look, the premise of my book, when I used to tell people, they would say, well, why? The short answer is the sexism, the misogyny, the racism that is so unquantifiable. And I think many people who are looking at these election results are parsing through, did that play a role here? I think the answer is yes, especially when you look at, the way that male voters, especially young ones, ended up coming out to vote. Gender has always been a central theme for former President Donald Trump, and I don't mean that in the way necessarily that he talks about women, though certainly there's a sexist tone to that. I mean it in the way that he himself leverages masculinity. It is so central to his political identity, and it's something that was resonant, I think, with male voters across the racial spectrum. But I do choose also an optimistic view of this, which is that when you look at the results, millions of people once again voted for a female candidate for the highest executive office in the land. And that is a point of progress simply because it normalizes the practice.
So like Hillary Clinton in 2016, VP Harris overwhelmingly won black women, but did not win white women. Do we have an idea of why that is?
This also, again, takes me back to when I was writing my book, because the hill that I was dying on then was people saying to me casually, well, women are the ones that didn't come out for Hillary Clinton, white women, as if they had bucked the trend. That wasn't true, because white women do typically tend to vote conservative, at least the majority of them. So the question I went into this election with was, will white women, because of reproductive rights, because of the issue set, because there's another woman on the ticket, will they change how they voted? The answer ultimately was no. But at the same time, black women have always been the centerpiece of the female voting coalition for Democrats. And the reason that that's important is because right now, Democrats are the only party that has shown they will put a woman up for this job.
What do you think this means for female candidates, either party, in the future?
The thing that I have heard consistently from people who are parsing through these election results is, what do I tell my daughter? Because daughters, political stripes aside, they just want to see reflective governance. And that's why this book, I think, is still important. This question of when will we see America elect a woman? We are half the population, more than half the population. Government should be reflective of its population. And so I think the normalization factor of seeing Hillary Clinton, seeing Kamala Harris, seeing people like Governor Gretchen Whitmer and other key female figures, that's going to be so central and so important. The good news here is that the pipeline is full. More women are in elected spaces in government, and that means that more women can run credibly and viably for president in the future. We will not see a point where women are not running, and that's the good news.
We see a few examples listed here on the screen there. So let's go through that. I mean, let's look at the pipeline beyond the presidential race. What historic achievements did we see for women?
Well, you showed Lisa Blunt Rochester there. She was in the House. Now she's going to be one of 2 black women serving in the Senate. That is such a small number, but it is also monumental, because after Kamala Harris left and before LaFonza Butler took the Senate seat for California, there were no black women serving in the Senate body. That is a clear oversight, again, for reflective governance. People who can say, this policy, I know from my experience, will not impact people in the positive or negative way that we think it will. And it makes policy and politics better for Americans when more people who look like them assume those spaces of power.
Ali Vitale, fabulous reporting throughout this entire cycle. So fun, again, to have you in here. Thank you.
Coming up, moving forward after an election season like no other.
After the break, the doctor is in to help you deal with any emotions you might be feeling, whichever way you voted. That's next on Morning News Now.
Finally this hour, what might be a much-needed moment for some to decompress after an especially tense election season.
Yeah, no matter what side of the aisle, right? It's been tense. Many people, for them, this election ran high with emotions because of that polarized political climate. So what's the best way now to process any emotions in a healthy way?
Here with some tips on just how to do that, family and clinical psychologist, Dr. Jen Hartstein. Good to have you with us. So people are dealing with emotions, especially if you were a supporter of Vice President Harris. It can feel like maybe even losing a loved one. That's a healing process.
Yes.
How can you start that process?
Well, it starts kind of just one day at a time, right? I think we have to allow ourselves to experience the emotions that we have. I think a lot of people don't feel comfortable in that space. But if we do that, then we can kind of give ourselves the time, 24 hours, 48 hours, and then start to move forward, start to create a plan of what you can do next. Because control what you can. there's a lot of it that's out of our control, and we have to accept that.
I think the other thing, right, is like in addition to how you might as an individual be feeling, we're all kind of tense as a group. I've been seeing a lot of really negative stuff, for example, on social media, which is just, it's tough to go through all that. What would you recommend, just like, I know this is a big question to ask you, but like for America to just try to like, you know, ease the tension a little bit,
right.
Like not make it so intense?
Okay, we don't have enough time for that whole question.
I know.
But you have some time, though. Go for it.
So I think what you did something with your body that was interesting. You kind of went like this, right?
Yeah.
I think we all have to take a collective exhale because we've been holding our breaths where our bodies have been like so tense. Breathing relaxes us, brings our kind of parasympathetic nervous system back into place, and allows us then to problem solve. We've all been so emotional. It shuts off our frontal lobe. We can't problem solve. We can't act in a way that's respectful or calm or helpful or in an organized way. So if we can kind of calm our system, move your body, take a break, get off social media, stop watching the news a little bit, be with community that you love, that opens us up for conversation, that allows for potential change. And that's where we really need to lean in right now.
Leaving social media is honestly a great idea because that is where so much of the toxicity and your emotions get up. So I think if you're feeling that, I can't recommend it enough for you. I had an interesting situation. I was in Wisconsin talking with voters on Tuesday. I spoke with one woman, and I always ask people, do you mind telling me who you voted for? And she said, no, I'm not going to tell you, which I totally understand. She said, because there is so much divisiveness. And she wasn't talking about her community. She was talking about her household. She said there's like a 60-40 split in my household. So we have that. Some people in the household are happy with the results. Some people are unhappy about the results. What do you do if you're living in that situation? What's the best way to handle it?
So I think it goes back to finding fundamental respect, right? I am not going to convince you that you have to agree with me and vice versa. So how can we work together to set some boundaries, set some limits, create some space? I don't want to talk about this anymore. Can you not gloat? Can you allow me to be sad and not tell me to just like get over it, right? So can we create some general validation, respect, and opportunity to just not talk about it? I can say, hey, thanks. I don't want to talk about this with you anymore. Congratulations, and let's move on. And if we want to have a conversation, set up some parameters around that. Don't be tired. Don't be hungry. Be hydrated. Have a timeout. And then you can sit down and have some conversation.
I think what you just said is so important, the fundamental respect aspect of it, because I think, I mean, as the results show, a lot of the country is very happy, or maybe if even not very happy, this is, you know, what they wanted. And so I think respect seems like the foundation of everything on both sides.
Yes. And I think that in this election season is something that many have felt doesn't exist, right? And then many are feeling they're not going to have in this administration. So it's finding it within your community, finding it within yourself, and then starting, if you want to make change for the next election, start now, right? Let's lean in. Where can you be proactive? What can you do to start to make that change for the next opportunity?
Dr. Jen, good to have you with us. Some good advice. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Decompression.
That is going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.